Hello, my name is Ben Andrews and this is the first video for the Breaking Barriers series. A series which is going to explore the barriers disabled people face when trying to lead more active lifestyles. So the first barrier we're going to be looking at is transport. It's not always easy for disabled people to get around. Due to the exclusiveness of vehicles, many disabled people are unable to drive, with public transport their only option. From inaccessible buses to lack of accessible taxis, transport isn't always a comfortable, safe option for disabled people. A commute without transport can be just as daunting. With uneven pavements, high curbs and many obstacles to navigate, it can be a real minefield for people with physical, sensory and learning disabilities. Let's hear from Eric and his experience of getting around.
My name is Eric McKinder. I'm a volunteer campaign coordinator with the RNIB for the City of Salford. I met Ben because I was having a lot of trouble finding access to exercise programs, and Ben became my personal coach and introduced me to the gym and how to use the equipment at the gym. My mode of transport for the gym was actually using local taxi service. On benefits, it's very expensive to use taxis. You can get taxi vouchers instead of a bus pass, but they only last for a very brief period of time. And the taxi service isn't perfect because the drivers are not trained in sighted guide. So it's left to the individual driver whether he wants to help you or not.
I've just seen an article about that actually saying, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's a hassle for drivers to deal with disabled people. That's a perception.
Yeah, I think it should be part of the training process for a taxi cab licence, is that you are taught how to assist a disabled person properly and with dignity and respect. And the Ring and Ride service is basically been cut back to a bare minimum. It's very difficult to get rides, and if you want to go somewhere within sort of over a 6-mile radius, you can't even get a ride to it. So it makes the accessibility there very difficult indeed, and you find that you're stuck without rides to trips and things like that. The service itself initially was great because for someone with vision loss they act as a sighted guide as well. But due to the cuts with local government and austerity, it's just becoming basically non-existent nowadays.
I mean, I'm a massive advocate for Ring and Ride. I always try and point people in that direction, but I know they have got their own issues going on. I always make clients aware that they're entitled to a bus pass to get around by the buses. Obviously there's some issues again with getting onto buses and using them as someone with a disability. So looking at disability as a whole, and trying to generalise in some way, not just speaking for people who are blind or visually impaired, what type of tips would you give people for getting around and different services, what they can access?
Well, there are some very good charities out there. There's one called Being There, which is a service that takes you to and from hospital appointments door to door, and they act as a guide if you're visually impaired or a blind person. But they do fill in for people that have got issues where they need assistance and they have a lot of difficulty getting to and from appointments. Other than that, the bus service is not very good. I've found personally, I've had some bad experiences where because the bus services aren't using audible signals on the bus, so you don't know where you actually are, and if the driver forgets you, you can be led off at the wrong stop, and if you're a blind person it can be a bit of a nightmare because you don't know exactly where you are. It's accessible more for people with wheelchair access. People with other disabilities, I think it's just not been thought through properly.
Do you think to some extent it's about taking transport completely out of the equation and council sort of improving the local offer to the point where you've got accessible opportunity to keep active on your doorstep?
It's very difficult. There's one blind organisation that's suddenly looking at stopping volunteer drivers, but if they take the volunteer drivers away, I can't get to the venues.
So what do you think needs to happen right at the top, the decision makers, to ensure that transport is accessible for not just, as we talked about before, wheelchair users with a ramp, but to make sure it's accessible for a range of people with disabilities? I mean, I'm massive on consultation from the get-go, and this isn't just about transport, but for buildings, activities in general, planning, consulting with people with a range of disabilities to make sure it is accessible.
I think that accessibility needs more community consultation, and it needs to be a cross-disability consultation, not just people with a wheelchair. There's an awful lot more people that are disabled that don't use a wheelchair, and I think they've got to sort of take in mind that without accessibility to services to get you to A to B, you become isolated, you become segregated, and you're just not part of society, which is wrong. I think they've got to improve the disabled transport system, not cut it back. Try and get more volunteer drivers for people with disabilities, and improve the bus service, that it becomes a safe method of transport that disabled people can be confident in.
Yeah. Obviously, all that in an ideal world would have a massive impact on your ability to get around, to better manage your health and well-being.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's really good. Thanks a lot, Eric.